Brian Cain, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. One of my favorite people on earth. I'm excited that we get a chance to jam today and really explore the mental game, mental performance master. We're going through your ABCs today. This is your content. I'm so excited to dive in and teach my listeners. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, DJ, thanks for having me again, man. And congrats on pushing the sled and congrats on stepping into dad world, bro. Couldn't be more proud of you for your continued progress, man, as like the next gen mental performance coach, man. You're dominating the day and I'm fired up to be here.
Man, I appreciate you so much. Let's dive right in. So today we're going through what you call your ABCs of mental performance mastery. Such a cool concept. Each letter has a concept, a quote, or a strategy that goes with it. We're going to go through as many letters as we can in the time that we have today. We might jam on one for a few minutes. We might just say it and go to the next one, but we'll take one at a time here. And it starts with A, Cainer. You say ACE, actions, changes, everything. Talk to my listeners about the letter A.
Yeah, I mean, where the concept of the ABCs came from, right, is one of the books that's had the most impact on me. To give a little backstory, is The Mental ABCs of Pitching by Harvey Dorfman. In The Mental ABCs of Pitching by Harvey Dorfman, he takes, 50, it's actually 80 words through the alphabet, and he'd say attack. Here's what attack means as a pitcher. Aggressive. Here's what aggressive means as a pitcher. So, I created a podcast series on Mental Performance Daily where I went through and talked about all of these letters. So, when you talk about the ABCs of mental performance and talk about acting, ACE, acting changes everything, it reminds me of Jake Arrieta. And when Jake Arrieta was a pitcher at TCU, I was there. I was one of the first teams ever consulted with in 2006. And it's funny how when you're with a team and you're kind of trying to read the room, right? Like you never know, are these guys into it? Are they not? What's their body language like? How engaged are they? And at the time in 2006, I would say, well, I didn't really think Arrieta was that engaged, but you can also misread people based off of, are they more stoic than others? Are they a little bit more reserved, whatever it is. So, I'm not sure he's that into it. He's a first team All-American, one of the best pitchers in college baseball, first round draft pick. Well, fast forward to 2014, I think it was, 2015, he's a Cy Young Award winner for the Cubs. And in 2016, they win a World Series. So after he wins the Cy Young in 2015, there's an article that comes out about him. And they're asking him about, his mental performance and things he does. And he goes, man, when I was at TCU all the way back in 2006, we brought in a sports psychologist. He had us lay down on the ground and go through visualization. And he's like, I thought it was kind of weird, but what I've realized over the course of time is that I visualize every day, and visualization is a form of my preparation. He goes, the other thing that resonated, I took away, was ACE. Acting changes everything. And he goes, when you play over 162 games and you step on the rubber, you're not going to be guaranteed to feel a certain way. And too often athletes go searching for a feel instead of searching for a focus. And I want that focus to be, you're presenting confidence. Acting changes everything. Act as if it were impossible to fail. Project like you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Amy Cuddy backed this up with her science and her book on presence, right? Her TED Talk seen by over 70 million people on the science and power of body language, that body language shapes who you are, that when you fake it till you make it, you're actually faking it till you become it. So you have to act how you want to feel, not let how you feel dictate how you act. So Jake would write ACE underneath his hat. He started doing that in 2006. I had no idea until he talked about it in an article after he won the Cy Young in 2015. And another great athlete that learned how to ACE, acting changes everything, with George St. Pierre. And when I first met with George St. Pierre, the Hall of Fame UFC fighter in 2006, after losing his title to Matt Serra as 11-1 favorite, biggest upset in UFC history at the time, he said, well, Brian, you I'll do my George St. Pierre accent. He's like, Brian, you work with a lot of other of my training partners, and they said that you helped him to be more confident. He's like, I'm looking for more confidence. I want to feel more confident. I said, George, I can't help you, bro. I can't help you feel more confident. He's like, oh, but this guy said that, and that guy said this. He goes, yeah, I think you can. I said, I can help you act more confident. And when you act more confident, you might feel more confident. And usually you will, but not always. So we're not going searching for a feeling. We're going searching for how we're going to act confident. And we're going to act confident with our BFS, which takes us into B. A, B, here we go. B, body language, focus, self-talk. When you're going to act with confidence and you're going to make confidence a choice, that's your C. Confidence is a choice. Is that confidence is going to happen from your body language, focus, and self-talk. Stop looking for confidence being a feeling. Forget how you feel. Put your energy and attention into focus. Put your energy and attention into what you're doing. And when you get present and immersed in what you're doing, you don't even think about if you feel confident, right? I mean, I've spoken in national stages in front of 5,000, 10,000 people for 20 years. I would say terrified. Like I'm scared. I don't want to let people down. I got a ton of nervous energy. I got a lot of anxiety because I'm excited to go do that. So I know before I go on stage, I'm in the back at the National Baseball Coaches Convention, getting to go out and rip in front of 6,000 in Chicago. I'll send you a link to that video. You can post it maybe with the notes here because I think it's one of the best 40-minute presentations I've ever given, DJ. And I'm in the back, and the guy that goes on before me is sitting in a chair like this. Doesn't move, stoned. And I'm like, hey, man, you got to go bring the juice. And he was the most boring speaker that was there the entire day. Stood hands on the podium, didn't do anything. I'm in the back like a UFC fighter. I'm pumping my arms. I'm tuck jumping. I'm moving around, stretching my hips, practicing my talk the whole time. And I go ripping through the stage with a ton of energy, like being shot out of a cannon, and get after it because here's, energy is your edge. And I wanted to go out there with energy because energy is contagious. And most people, when they're sitting in like a keynote talk like that, they're going to remember less of the content that you share, but they're going to remember the experience that they had. So you're trying to provide an experience while delivering world-class content. But I was nervous. You had to act different than how you feel. So did Jake Arrieta. So did George St. Pierre. And when St. Pierre realized, man, how I carry myself and how I act changes my body chemistry. Thank you, Amy Cuddy, and her research on presence. And allows me to go out there and act as if it were impossible to fail. Thank you, Dr. Rob Gilbert, for bringing that out from Success Hotline. He went out there and was undefeated for the next 10 years.
So let's go back here. So we have A, action changes everything, or acting changes everything. B is body language focused self-talk. C is confidence is a choice. I want to go back to is not only is it acting changes everything, Brian, but it's action changes everything. Recently, Dr. Rob Gilbert, someone who I also listen to every morning, talked about there's a difference between people that talk mental performance and the people that do mental performance. I'm driving the car and I'm going, that is gold. There are some people that talk about it. There are some people that do mental performance. Talk to me about the importance of doing mental performance and doing action. What does that look like to you?
DJ, 3 frogs are sitting on a log. One decides to jump. How many frogs are left? And the listeners are going to go, well, 3 minus 1 is 2, Caner. There's 2 left. No, the answer is 3. Because just because you decide to jump doesn't mean you take the action to jump. So acting changes everything. Action changes everything. Right? You got to take action. Tony Robbins talks all the time about you got to be somebody who takes massive action, and sometimes taking massive action can get you in trouble. Like me right now, I just show and go ran a marathon, which I invited you to. Good move, not coming. And now and this morning I had a steroid injection in my back because I have got pins and needles down my right leg because I probably pushed it a little bit too hard, but good. We'll deal with it. Here's your G. But the idea around action changes everything. Acting changes everything. Let me give you 2 more just to round out our 4-pack of ace cards. Attitude changes everything, and attitude is the decision, only the most important decision you're going to make every day in terms of how you show up and how you handle adversity and how you take a perspective on things, your mindset. But then also awareness changes everything, right? Because awareness is the first step to growth. What you're aware of, you can change. What you're unaware of, you can't. I'll go back to the George St. Pierre example. He was unaware that the way you carry yourself with your body language will impact how you think. And he was unaware that like how you think changes how you feel. But the hard part with that is I can't always control what I think, right? We all throughout the course of a day have random thoughts that pop through our head that we're going, why would I think that? I would never say that out loud, right? But we can be way more aware of our body, especially athletes, because they're so physical. And when they're aware of their body and they carry themselves like they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, carry themselves with that confidence, that's the ultimate thing to do if you want to be able to be a confident performer. It starts with how you carry yourself.
Action changes everything. A. B, body language focused self-talk. C, confidence is a choice. The D goes like this: do what you said you were going to do. When we were writing Push the Sled, I was looking into confidence, and I really wanted to dive into my 7th pillar. My 7th skill is unshakable self-confidence. And what I learned, Brian, is that the Latin word for confidence is confidore. And if you you look into that description, what is confidore? It means intense inner trust. I'd had a mutual friend on the show, Sean Casey. I said, man, what do you think about confidence, man? Like, what are your thoughts when somebody says they're not feeling confident? And he says they haven't been doing the work. They haven't prepared enough before they got into the cage or before they got onto the plate. And I said, well, how do you do it? He goes, it's intense inner trust. How do you build inner trust? You build trust by doing what you said you were going to do. And then he flipped it and he said, tell me about somebody that you trust in your life. I told him about him. He said, okay, tell me more. I trust them because they always show up. They're consistent and they do what they said they were going to do. Light bulb went off. So
Mm.
trustworthy people, other people in our world are consistent and they consistently do what they said they were going to do. Same goes with us. So the D, do what you said you were going to do. Why is that important?
Because of what you just explained. I can't say it better than you just did. Are you going to trust somebody who doesn't do what they say they're going to do? I mean, one of my core principles, right? My core principles, jump back to C. Do you have a set of core principles? Fly down to P. Do you operate off a principle or preference? I'm sitting with Vitor Belfort, the UFC Hall of Famer, two-time world champion, in the sauna before he fights Chris Weidman for the UFC title as he's cutting weight. And I asked him, I said, champ, what do you know now you wish you knew when you were just getting started as an 18-year-old UFC, MMA world champion? And he said, Brian, the biggest difference between a boy and a man is a boy makes decisions out of preference and a man makes decisions out of principle. And I thought about that. That hit me hard. And I was like, what are my principles? Because I'm living out of preference. I do what I feel like doing. And you know what that does? Gets you decent results, not world-class results. Not better today than yesterday. Not better tomorrow than today. That requires principle. So my principles were apples, or are apples today: accountable, present, process, love, energy, and service. As defined as accountable, and do what you said you're going to do in Snow Globe life. Present, be where your feet are. Process, have a plan and execute. Loving is just simply be kind. Energy, bring the juice. And S is to whom much is given, much is expected. Make sure you pay back and give back to what Ken Revisit has given you. So when you talk about doing what you said you were going to do, that is the foundation of trust. Can I trust that if you say, I'm going to do this, you're going to follow up and actually get it done? So DWISYW, D, do what you said you would do.
So
Accountability. You can count on me. I can count on you. We got trust, and then we can start doing things. Every solid relationship, coach, athlete, husband, wife, marriage, partner, however you want to slice it up, is built on trust.
And I think that over time is where we see sprinkles of confidence start to accumulate when we continue to do what we say we're going to do. We're flying. I love this. Let's go to E. This is a huge one. E+R equals O. Talk to Brian about my listeners about what is E+R O, man.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna slide another E in there because I mentioned it earlier, so I want to circle back with it for repetition. Is energy is your edge. Energy is contagious. The question is yours worth catching? And DJ, every time I get with you, your energy is contagious, man. You are the future of mental performance. I appreciate what you bring to my life, which you probably don't even know that you're doing. So E+R equals O. First, it's a concept I heard from Dr. Rob Gilbert on Success Hotline. I've been calling Success Hotline since March of 2006. So Ken Ravizza, Rob Gilbert, Brian Johnson, massive impact on my life. And I'd say just by sheer volume of 3 minutes a day since 2006, Gilbert has been the most. I get the most in-person time with Ken, Brian Johnson right there in terms of volume of listening to his philosopher's notes for 20 minutes a day, roughly since 2010, when I came across philosopher's notes, now heroic. And, I first heard Dr. Gilbert say E+R equals O, event plus response equals outcome. You are not responsible for the events that happen to you, the events that happen around you. You are responsible for how you choose to respond to those events. And how you respond to those events is going to impact the outcome of those events. I go back even further. Jack Canfield, author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. He wrote a book called The Success Principles. Highly recommend the book. It's short chapters on concepts that he teaches. Another book I recommend, similar to that, short concepts, right? Something you can read like a page or two a day and be able to put it down and pick it back up consistently. Paul Rabel, the Michael Jordan of lacrosse, his book, How Champions Think, or The Way of the Champion, one of those two. I get it confused with Bob Rotella's book. You'll have to look that up. But Paul Rabel, Rabil, his book, Short Chapters. And in there, he also talks about you can't control what goes in around you, only control how you respond to it. Another great book, Above the Line by Urban Meyer, right? In that, the former Ohio State football coach that won a national title there and at Florida, he talks about that being one of his most important meetings that he had. He's at Ohio State. He walks in at the program when he took them over. They weren't, the top 10 program every day that they are now. He walks in, first team meeting, draws a line across the board. And he says to the guys in the locker room, you've been here. I haven't. We know what it takes to win a championship. I'm not sure you do, because if you did, you would have done it already. There's only two types of behavior, men: above the line, below the line. What are the behaviors that are above the line? They're going to help us to win. what are the behaviors that are below the line that are going to cause us to lose that you guys have seen? They start writing up on the board, green light markers for what's above the line, red light markers for what's below the line. And he comes back and goes, there it is. There's the winning behaviors we need more of. There's the losing behaviors we need less of. And that concept of above the line and below the line really references principle over preference. But I think it also references E+R=O, because there's events that are going to happen in your life. I blew a disc in my back. I had a friend that committed suicide. I have a two sick children that are at home. All these things that happen, right? Like, that's life. No one is immune to life's challenges. Nobody. But how are you going to respond? That's the question. How are you going to respond to success? How are you going to respond to failure? Take the Major League Baseball playoffs, right? For wild card is going on recently. The Kansas City Royals go into Baltimore. They face the Orioles. I got the starting pitcher, Corbin Burns, for the Orioles, and I got the guy that got the base hit that scored the RBI, Bobby Witt Jr. The Royals win 1-0. Royals come back and win 2-1 the next day. What's the question to Corbin Burns after a great start where he goes 8 innings and gives up 1 run? How are you going to respond moving forward? What's the message to Bobby Witt Jr., or the question to Bobby Witt Jr. after he gets the game-winning hit in the Royals' first playoff series in like 20 years, and now they're going on, and he's the face of the organization? How are you going to handle this? How are you going to respond? So it's the same question. How are you going to respond to the event? In Bobby's situation, very favorable, moving on. In Corbin's situation, favorable for what he can't control. He pitched phenomenal, but the team lost. How are we going to respond, right? So Bobby's response is, what am I doing getting ready to go play the Yankees? Corbin's response is, how am I getting ready to come home and be a dad in the offseason, going into arguably becoming the highest paid player in baseball this offseason in free agency, behind probably Ohtani and Trout.
When I talk about E+R O with student athletes and team consulting, we break down the R, because the R is within our control. So I want to double down on the R, Brian. And when I talk about the R, it's kind of 2 choices. I can react or I can respond. When I respond, it's usually calm, cool, collected. It's not full of emotion. It's usually pre-designed. I know what I'm going to do, release routine, etc. When I react, it's usually a quick trigger. It's usually full of emotion. It's usually loud. It's usually something I'm going to regret. It's impulsive. Talk to me about the difference between reacting to something and responding to something. If you value that, R is the most important. The E is out of our control. So is the O.
Yep.
So let's get
Yep.
really good. Let's get really good with the R. Talk to me about what you think about react versus respond.
Yeah, to me, it's very simple definition and clarification of the two. A reaction is an emotional response to an event, where a response is a calculated, intentional response to an event. A response can look emotional. Like, I can have a in control, intentional tirade that looks emotional, looks out of control, looks fired up, throwing things to try to get an impact out of the people that I'm with. But it's intentional. I always go back to the movie Miracle. Have you seen the movie Miracle, right? Herb Brooks comes in at some point, and I don't think it was a Ruzioni, and he's like, yeah, hey, is that ice bag on your knee? Your knee's a long way from a heart, you pansy, right? And then all of a sudden, now the locker room wants to fight Herb. They go out there and play great, and they win. And he goes walking out of the locker room after flipping over the table, right? And he says to his assistant, he goes, I hope that gets him going. And he was totally in control. It was totally calculated, but came across in a way that people might go, oh, he was out of control. He wasn't out of control. Just like a guy can walk into that locker room and not say anything, or walk in that locker room and be very passive and be like, hey, we're okay, guys. We got it. We're good. We're okay. That's out of control too, because you're not dealing with a hard reality that your team's underperforming and they need to wake up, and you better do something to get them woken up, or your Olympic dreams are going to crash. So being able to be in control of yourself, what I would call state management, right, ties back to our signal lights that we talk about in our coaches certification. So if you're a coach listening to this and you're interested in more mental performance, DJ is one of our top certified coaches, and Zach Sorensen with the Cincinnati Reds is one of our certified coaches. So there's elite mental performance coaches like you guys that are doing this. If you're a coach and interested, DJ, maybe we can link to that in the notes below here. But that's a lot of what we talk about is training your athletes on how to have the awareness of your signal lights to be in control, so you can be in control of your performance. You got to be in control of yourself before you can control your performance. And that requires responding versus I react, emotional reaction versus calculated response.
Let's keep this thing going here. When you did this a year ago, Brian, on the Mental Performance Mastery podcast, I took notes. I actually have a notebook that's dedicated to Brian Cain mental performance. Everything that I've ever seen you do, whether it's the monthly calls, podcast, you have your own notebook, man. So I should have brought that and showed it to you. But it's full of your stuff, man. It's full of wisdom. So
It's awesome.
when I write all this stuff down, I put it in a Google Doc. I send it to the athletes that I'm working with. I say, "Hey, man, I want you to look. I want you guys to look through all these letters and just give me some feedback. I want you to circle which one resonates with you most. And keep in mind, you probably did 5 per letter, 26 letters. There's over 100 little statements and quotes. Interestingly enough, the most common piece of feedback that I got, every kid circled the same letter, and they circled letter F. I don't know why exactly. I know it's powerful, but this is what they circled, Brian. Failure is feedback. I kid
Mm.
you not, 5 to 7 kids all circled the same darn letter. Why is failure is feedback so important to those kids listening, and why is it so important to you?
Well, it's important to me because it was important to Ken Revisit, my mentor, whose face I have tattooed on my chest, who is the creator of all things, you know, at least in my world, most things, mental performance, right? So I'm carrying the torch as a soldier in Kenny's army. I mean, my identity that I have for my work is the Gen Jan in Kenny's army, the general and the janitor, the general leading the troops and supporting the troops, and the janitor cleaning the toilets to make sure that this field is left cleaner and better than when I found it. And he used to say in class all the time, failure, it's positive feedback. If you want to win all the time, that's easy. Quit playing Major League Baseball, go and roll with the junior college. They got less high standards than the NCAA, and you'll get some eligibility, even though you played pro, and you'll go get great results because you're a junior college. If that doesn't work out, go down and play JV. So failure is feedback. You're going to learn from when you lose, right? Conor McGregor, the great MMA world champion, you know, inside the octagon, different discussion of how he shows up outside the octagon in certain places. But, you know, we're going to look at the athlete inside of there and what he was able to accomplish in that sport, world class. And his book is called Win or Learn. It's actually his coach's book, John Kavanaugh, is called Win or Learn. And that was one of the mentalities that Conor, you know, shared that made him such a great MMA fighter was he never lost a fight. He was always either won or he learned. And I think that idea that failure is positive feedback is the same thing with win or learn, that when you have a performance, and I'd even take it to say, you know, failure is positive feedback. I'd also say performance is positive feedback if you process it right. Kobe Bryant was on the School of Greatness podcast, Lewis Howes, and the one clip there that really resonated with me the most among many was when he said, when Lewis asked him, "What does losing feel like to you?" And Kobe goes, "Oh, it's exciting." He goes, "It's exciting?" He goes, "Yeah, it's exciting because there's answers there." And Lewis goes, "Well, you probably learn more from losing than from winning." And Kobe goes, "No, it's the same as long as you process it the same way." So you ask yourself, whether I won or I lost, what did I do well? What can I do better? And how can I do the things I did well again? How can I do the things I want to do better in the future? And then you go to work to improve your performance. So the idea of failure as positive feedback is a spin on, like, we can't be afraid to fail. We have to actually embrace failure and use it as information and data. But we also have to do the same with winning. And ultimately, there's a third option brought up by Trevor Moawad in his great book, Getting to Neutral, where he talks about if you can take a neutral mindset, it's not positive, it's not negative, it's just neutral. That's going to be what allows you to get the most data out of your performance, because your ego isn't tied up in the win or the loss. You're not, you know, you're not overly excited and taking things for granted or overly negative and hammering yourself. You're looking at it as, what do we do well? What do we want to do better? How are we going to do it moving forward? What's the data I can use for improvement?
G is good. And this is funny, man, because it's one thing to understand what good is, it's another thing to do it. I talk about, again, Dr. Rob Gilbert. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do mental performance. I've had a chance to listen to you on Zoom calls, and sometimes
Mm.
technology isn't going well, whether it's what we're doing now or
Often, often.
many of the
Yeah.
monthly calls. And
Yeah.
what do
Yeah.
you always say, dude? It's a trigger. You go good. Talk to me, my
Yeah.
listeners, about why you say good.
Well, it goes back to E+R equals O, right? It's the event. My technology's not working. The event. I got two sick kids this morning, and I got a right leg that's at sleep, and I got a cortisone shot earlier this morning, and I on a scale of 1 to 10, physically 10 being I feel great, 1 being I feel terrible, I'm probably a 3. But you know what? Nobody cares. I still have work to do. I'm still going to show up for this podcast. I'm still going to bring the juice. I'm still going to act different than how I feel. And what you find, what's interesting, right, is I'm going to all these doctor's appointments trying to figure out what's going on with my disc and all that. They're like, "Well, how does it feel during the day?" And I'm like, "I don't really notice it during the day." Like, "Well, what are you doing?" I go, "I'm coaching." I go, "And when I coach, I don't have time to feel how my right leg feels. It doesn't matter, because when I'm coaching, I'm thinking about my body." So when I hurt the most is when I'm in bed, when I get up in the morning, when I get done coaching, right? Like, it feels the best when I'm coaching. It feels pretty good when I'm with my kids. The problem with my kids is I'm picking them up and moving them around. They're 2 and 1.5, so it gets aggravated a little bit. But like when you're coaching and you're here, you're not thinking about that. You're not thinking about your leg, right? So the mentality of good Ken Ravizza used to say, beautiful. We give up 3 runs in the top of the first inning at Cal State Fullerton. We come in, we haven't even hit yet. He's going, beautiful. Got them right where we want them. Give them an early lead. They'll get complacent. They'll make mistakes. We take over. Beautiful. So Ken was saying beautiful back in the early 2000s before, before Jocko was Jocko. He was still an active duty Navy SEAL. He wasn't doing the podcast. It's probably 20 years before that, 15 years before that. But Jocko Willink, the retired Navy SEAL commander who now runs Echelon Front, and one of his podcasts went viral, was just a clip on good, right? And he's saying everything that happens negative or could be challenging, he goes, I'm going to say good. And we're going to choose to end the complaining and focus on the solution. And Jason Selk, who wrote the book, I think a 10-minute toughness, good mental performance book, used to work with the Cardinals. He calls it RSF. Charlie Smith calls it RSF, relentless solution focus. And I think when you're getting into RSF and relentless solution focus, you have to just get past the problem. And a lot of times to get past the problem, you say good, because that stops it. And then you go looking at what we're going to do next, and that's something I think is super powerful. And it's just at this point, I'm trained, right? Everything in life is a trainable skill. Your response to events is a trainable skill. Still need to get better with it. But most of the time, if something bad happens, the first thing I'm going to say is good, especially if I'm with other people, because there's like that coach part of me that's there. I got to get better with that when I'm like by myself, instead of there being some adult language before I finally get to good. I still have about a 2 to 3 minute window, like where I'll kind of lose it and hammer myself and get frustrated like anybody else. And then finally I'll get to, all right, it is what it is. You're being an idiot here. Good. Move on. What's the solution? Move forward,
We're on I. It's the start that stops most people.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to be good at anything, you got to get started. And I think too often people get paralyzed by the size of the mountain thinking, oh, I got to do all of this. For example, one of my corporate coaching clients that I work with, I guess I'd call him a coach. He's a mental performance coach. You could call that corporate coaching, right? It's not athlete coaching, but coach coaching. So this mental performance coach, young, energetic, knowledgeable, great pedigree, been an athlete, been a coach, like going to be fantastic. Right. As we were talking about like where he's at in his career and what the next step is, it's like, oh, you got to make a lead generation, like a free course that when people come to your website, they can take. So they learn who you are, they get your content. And then once they get that content at the end of the free course, there's a call to action. And that call to action is, do they want to buy your book? Do they want to work with you one-on-one? And then from there, then I start outlining like what the next year-long process looks like, saying, hey, here's the entire elephant. And they go, I don't know if I can do that because the task is too big, versus just going, hey man, your next step is a lead gen. And your next step in that is to come up with a framework for a 45-minute lead gen course. And that 45-minute lead gen course is going to be 5-minute intro into who you are and what the content is. And then 7 5-minute blocks of where you're teaching your best content. And then a 5-minute wrap up. Write that. Don't even think about recording it. Just write what that's going to be. And that makes the task much easier, right? It's no different than me saying, man, I got to go run. When I was training for a 100-mile race, it's like, I got to run a 100-mile week. Well, not really. It's going to be 7 10-mile days. And not really. It's going to be 5 miles a day twice in my AM routine and my PM routine. And I'm going to do that twice for 7 days to get to 70 miles. I just got to get out the door this morning and run for an hour. I can do that, so it's shrinking the task. It's like when I wrote my first book, Toilets, Bricks, Fish Hooks, and Pride, like I remember my mother passed away in August of 2010. I got the phone call. I was at a hotel in Washington State. She was about to speak that day. She was in Massachusetts and passed unexpectedly of cancer. And my dad called to fill me in about 3 a.m, West Coast time, obviously not going back to sleep, grabbed my laptop, sat down, wrote the dedication to Toilets, Bricks, Fish Hooks, and Pride, dedicated it to my mom. And, thought, well, she always wanted me to write a book. How am I going to write a book? I'm not a writer. Like I don't consider myself a runner either. And I've done, 30 marathons and 100-miler. I don't consider myself a runner because I'm not fast, but I'm a runner who loves to run. I got to change the narrative on that. So with this idea about writing, say I'm not a writer, I've written 45 books, right? So that first book, I wrote the dedication and then I said, well, I guess I need to start writing this. And the next day, like 2 days later, I got a phone call from the National Softball Coaches Convention. This is August. And they said, we got a conference in December. Would you come to a pre-convention workshop for 4 hours? And I said, of course I can. Can I do it based off my book and sell my book? And they go, oh, we didn't know you had a book. I go, it'll be ready for then. I'm going to launch it at your event. And then 2 days later, I got a call from the National Baseball Coaches Convention to speak in front of, so it was like 2,000 and then 5,000 coaches. at the National Baseball Coaches Convention. I said, can I sell my book? Yes. So now the pressure was on. Now I had a deadline. And the difference between a dream and a goal is simply a deadline. And when I had that deadline to go, okay, I got to get this book done by November 1st, to get to an editor, to get published, to have in place, to bring with me to sell at this event in Florida in December. So if I need a book done by November 1st, and it's now, call it like end of August, what does it look like for me to write this book? How long do I want it to be? What are the main content I want to get away? How much do I need to write and dedicate? Boom, block on my schedule. So I would wake up and I would write from 5 to 7 a.m., 7 days a week. And I did that for 2 months. And then I sent my book to the editor. We got the book back and I had a book. So the idea that it's the start that stops most people is, if you look at writing a book, that's a formidable task. If you look at writing the book outline, you can do that. And once you have the book outline, can I go write that bullet point on the outline? I can do that. Can I write for 2 hours a day? That's the time block. Some days I wrote for 20 minutes of that because I had writer's block and didn't know what to do, but I was committed to sitting at my computer. And whether that was research, whether that was, writing, whatever it was, you just have to realize that it's the start that stops most people. And motivation comes, DJ, after movement begins. Most people make the mistake to think that motivation is going to come before I start the task and I need to be motivated to do the task. And I'd say, just remove that from your mindset and understand motivation is going to come after movement begins. So use all of your resources to get started. And to get started, you need to have good behavior design and good routines and good triggers and a good environment where there isn't distraction so that you can get to work, So it's the start that stops most people. I think is one of the most profound and simple statements and mindsets that there is. But the problem with it is it falls into what we call the rule of two easies. It's so easy to do. It's also easy not to do.
This dude is on fire right now. Do you need some water? Are you good? Are you good to keep going? You've just been spitting absolute gems right now.
Keep hammering, buddy. Let's go. This is what we live for. This is what we're here for.
K is K minus A equals nothing. Knowledge minus action equals nothing. We've talked about this a little bit, so maybe we can go a little bit quicker on this. But without action, it really doesn't matter. You can have all the knowledge in the world. K minus A equals nothing. Go ahead.
Yeah, knowledge minus power is inaccurate. Knowledge minus, what do they say? Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power is inaccurate. Knowledge is potential power. But the only way power gets activated is through action. Now, you can take action with no knowledge and get lucky and land on where you want to be. That happens. But you can also take knowledge, you can take action without knowledge and get further from where you want to be. And that's what put me on the path into mental performance. What you may or may not know is, a college baseball player at the University of Vermont, I was hyper motivated, and when they say, hey, you pitch with your legs, you got to run every day. And they meant like, you got to run like, 10 laps or something like that. I'm running 10 miles a day. Because I'm like, I want to be the best player here. I'm going to have to outwork everybody. So I did outwork everybody, but I outworked them doing distance running, which activated more slow twitch muscle fibers than fast twitch muscle fibers. And I did it at a obsessed rate. So I was injured a lot and fatigued a lot, and I performed terribly. So working hard doesn't work. You have to work at the right things. So, this idea that knowledge minus action gets you nothing. Well, action minus knowledge also gets you nothing. And it can get you the worst results. Because if I want to go that way to improve performance, but I blindly don't know which direction I'm getting started in, and I go that way 100 miles an hour, hard, dedicated, obsessed, I'm just getting further from my goal. And when that really resonated for me, ironically, was I remember November of my senior year. I had picked up Heads Up Baseball July 4th, 2000 at a Barnes & Noble in Boston by Ken Ravizza. I sent him an email. I said, hey, man, I love your book. I'm not going to play pro baseball. I'm a phys ed exercise science major. I want to come get a degree in the sports psychology. I want to be a coach. And I remember going out to see him speak, or I went out there to tour the campus for a couple of days, and I got the chance to see him speak. And he was speaking to all the like freshman athletes, I think it was at Cal State Fullerton. He showed a video. It was a video from Happy Gilmore, where Adam Sandler, Happy Gilmore's in the batting cage because he just got cut from the hockey team, and he stands in, and he's like 90 days or 365 more days till next year's hockey practice. I got to toughen up. 90-mile-an-hour fastball off the face. And he starts wearing these fastballs, and then Chubbs Peterson comes over and unplugs it, right? It's like, what are you doing, man? And then Happy goes, I'm trying to train for next year's tryouts. But if you watch the movie, you understand, like, Happy Gilmore's tough. Happy Gilmore's got a slap shot. The guy doesn't know how to skate. So he can go work on his slap shot and work on his toughness and how to fight and callousing his body and mind by taking 90-mile-an-hour fastballs from a cage off his head, and he's not going to get better. And I'm going, that's me. That's me. I'm running distance every day I'm doing drill work every day that may have nothing to do with what I need to do to improve mechanically. I'm doing drill work by grabbing Bob Bennett's book, The Art of Pitching, putting it in the bullpen, going, okay, I can do that. No one's giving me direction, going, why are you doing this? So I got literally no direction. And a obsessed, hyper motivated, no directive, it can work out if you get lucky. Most of the time it's not. You're going to be injured. I mean, look at what we're talking about today. You're going to be injured. It's like history repeats itself. You think I'd learn, slow learner. Um, but that's part of it. So knowledge minus action gets you nothing, but action minus knowledge can also get you nothing and get you into trouble too. But ultimately, if I have to pick somebody who's got knowledge and no action, or a lot of action with little knowledge, I'm going to take the guy taking action all day long, right? It's ready, fire, 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 aim. Not ready, aim, 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 never pull the trigger and fire. I'd even go as far to say fire, 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 ready, aim is the best approach.
Let's go to M. You talk about mental bricks, the importance of mental bricks. What are mental bricks, Brian?
Funny that you asked that, DJ. Mental bricks is a concept. I got these little foam bricks that I used to throw out in audiences when I would, I used to. I probably should bring them back. It's kind of a cool little toy. But I remember when I met with George St. Pierre to Exit Grill in Montreal months after he lost his fight to Matt Serra. And we were sitting there. My buddy Tom Murphy was one of his training partners who kind of coordinated that meeting and got us together. And I had a real brick, a real cinder brick. And I was asking George, man, tell me about what it's been like since you lost the fight. And I had painted the brick black and I had a silver Sharpie. And he's, things like, man, I let down my fans. I can't believe I lost this guy that I was supposed to beat. I was an 11-1 favorite. When you lose at that time, I lose half of my purse inside of the octagon. So I get paid half as much. I underestimated him. I shouldn't have done that. I feel like I'm not a pro. I shouldn't have done that. I lost my title. I'm writing down all these things on the brick. I hand him the brick across the table. I said, George, I want you to hold this up here for 30 seconds. Holds it. Puts it down, signs a bunch of autographs, comes back. I said, hold that for 3 minutes. Holds it. He's like, I'm going to hold it about a minute. He goes, you're going to hold it for 3 minutes? I said, no, you can put it down. I think the point's made. I said, could you hold that brick for 3 minutes? Yes. Could you hold it for 3 hours? He's like, probably not. Could you hold it for 3 days? Of course not. Could you hold it for 3 months? No chance. That's what you've been doing with the mental bricks from your loss to Matt Serra. As I go, physically, you don't experience it because you're not physically carrying a brick, but mentally you're carrying a brick, and it has the same emotional and mental and stress toll on you as if you're physically carrying this brick. So what the brick was, and I think as a mental performance coach, you're always looking for what's physical representation. I can have my athlete or the person I'm working with experiential education. So get a physical experience that relates to the concept I'm trying to teach. If I just talked to George about mental bricks, that sounds cool. But the fact that he's in a restaurant with all these people looking at him saying, wow, the champion's here, let's go get his autograph. And he's sitting there with a brick that has all the things he just said on it, holding it like this, it resonated differently. And then for spaced repetition, I said, gee, let's put this brick in your bag. And every day you go to the gym and you're walking up that 6th flight of stairs to the TriStar gym, you're going to feel this brick in your bag, but you're not able to take that brick out of there until you feel like you are ready to let go of that fight as you get ready to go fight Josh Koscheck in your next fight. Because the biggest thing he wanted to do, right, was I want to get back. I want to beat Matt Serra. I want to get my revenge. I want to get my belt back. The problem was he was fighting the #1 guy in the world at the time, ahead of him at that point, Josh Koscheck, and he had to fight Koscheck before he could get a return fight with Serra. So if he's focused on the Serra fight and doesn't go take care of business in the next one, he's not present because he's thinking about the title instead of what he needs to do today, prepare for the next fight. He ends up probably not becoming the guy that he is. So we had to release those mental bricks. And I just think that's an analogy for somebody going through a divorce, somebody that gets cut from a team, somebody whose career ends, someone who gets fired, right? Like, I've been in this mental performance game for a long time. I've gotten fired by a lot of clients who I really like and enjoy working with. And that's part of it. Sometimes you get fired because they go, hey man, you gave us everything that we need. You did a great job coaching. We got it. We want to put that money elsewhere. Fired. Other times you have a team that wins the national championship. And then they go, hey, we got it. We're good. Thanks. Fired. And other times it's maybe you don't perform quite as well because you missed something in working with that athlete. Right. But I'm not the mental performance coach that's going to sit here and tell you, oh, I've done this and that and everything's great. It always works out. Like BS, man. I've gotten fired a lot. And if you're not getting fired a lot, you want to know why? Because you ain't doing the work and you ain't pushing the envelope to get enough clients and push the envelope to make a real difference. So if you play it safe all the time and, live in your little bubble, you ain't never going to get fired. But if you're pushing the envelope to make a real difference and to be good and to say what needs to be said and to hold people accountable, sometimes people don't want to hear that. And it's going to be easier for them to get you out of there than to have to deal with the harsh reality of making changes.
We got a few more here. The N is no pressure, no diamonds. I like this thought when I'm talking to athletes about pressure is what you make it. So if you
Mm.
make it this really big thing, then yeah, you're probably going to act as if it's a really big thing and you might fold under pressure. So it's all a perspective thing. I'm curious, Brian, for the N, no pressure, no diamonds. The kids I'm talking to, they're not under the same kind of pressure that the athletes you're talking to. So what are the conversations like on no pressure, no dimes with some of the best athletes on the planet?
Well, let me phrase this up for you. Okay. The athletes that you're working with, or the athletes that I'm working with that are high school age or below, because I work with some of those athletes, not a ton anymore, but my team does on a daily basis, right? We got a team of mental performance coaches that coach a lot of those youth athletes. So if anybody's interested, just hit us up and we'll see if it's the right fit for you. Um, but the 10-year-old little league baseball player feels the same pressure that Bobby Witt Jr. does playing in a Major League Baseball postseason with the city of Kansas City on his back, because the 10-year-old doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't have the training, doesn't have the development that Bobby Witt Jr. has. So they both experience pressure relative to where they're at and their personal experience and their personal skill set. So, you know, the idea around pressure is a privilege and no pressure, no diamonds, right? The first person I heard say no pressure, no diamonds was Robert Griffin, the quarterback at Baylor, who, you know, won the Heisman Trophy. And that was a t-shirt that he used to wear like the press conferences, which was this idea of no pressure, no diamonds, like I thrive under pressure. And then if you read the book, The Cubs Way by Tom Verducci, it's big on how like Joe Madden and Theo Epstein reversed the curse with the Chicago Cubs. And it talks about how the meeting that Joe Madden and Ken Ravizza, my mentor, they worked together since the late 70s when Madden was a hitting coach with the Angels and all the way through Madden's time in LA and then with Tampa and then with Chicago and back in LA. They had a meeting. Ken showed me this napkin, bro. It was legit. They scripted out like the motto for the year with the Cubs on a napkin at a steakhouse in Scottsdale during spring training. And if you search Chicago Cubs Joe Madden target, right? There's a target with an arrow through it. You can find this graphic and maybe link to it down here in the show notes. And it says here's six keys to a championship season. Number one was embrace the target. They were picked to be the favorites to win the World Series in Vegas. Like, let's embrace that. We're not going to shy away from that. But on the tip of the arrow, it said pressure is a privilege. Pressure means you're in the right place. Pressure means you're doing something you care about. Pressure means you're doing something big. And then Joe would talk about, you know, where pressure gets too much and too magnified is when you're not prepared. Preparation, and here's the last thing I'll say here. Preparation allows you to turn pressure into pleasure. When you feel pressure that turns into anxiety that becomes like negative on your performance, it's because you're not prepared enough. And most of the time, you're not prepared enough physically or mentally. And this is why we have careers, DJ, is that most athletes or the people listening to this probably don't know how to perform or prepare mentally at a level to allow you to go out there and have a significant edge and confidere, intense trust that your preparation has allowed you to get there. And that's what we teach in our certification is how do you as a coach, if you're listening to this, who wants to prepare your athletes to show up their best, what it means the most under the brightest lights, and turn pressure into a privilege for consistent performance and choose their response to the negative events that are guaranteed to happen. Welcome to athletics. Then you should check out our NPM coaches certification or my free 3-day coaches course at briancain.com.
I'm gonna skip over O and go to P. I know we're close on time here. This is a really big one, especially what I'm working with. And in my so selfishly, this is what I'm seeing a lot is perfection. The kids, the student athletes I'm working with, they have a high standard for themselves. They consider themselves to be perfectionists. Now, on one hand, I really like that. I like that you have a high standard. There's a lot of kids out there, Brian, who have a very low freaking standard, low expectations. Like, God, you're just mediocre, man. And the kids that work with me, they want to be above and beyond. I love that. Talk to me though. It's a slippery slope. The P is progress over perfection. I'm going to link the episode you just did on mental performance mastery. You have 10 items on how to overcome perfection. Maybe just now, could you pick one? What do you do when somebody comes to you and says, I'm a perfectionist? How do you overcome that? What's one strategy?
I got a lot of experience here because I'm a recovering perfectionist myself. And I, a lot of times, relapse back into perfectionism myself. But Ken Reviz, I go back to, like, I had the best mentorship and mental performance that a coach could have. I had 2 years with Ken Reviza every day as his teaching assistant and grad student. Of my 30 credits I had in my master's at Cal State Fullerton, 21 were with Ken Reviza. And one of the things he used to say is, sorry, refresh me again. We're talking about what again right now?
Progress over perfection.
Yeah, you have to cut that piece out, right? Cut that
We can
piece
do that.
out.
We can do that.
What he used to say with progress over perfection is he would say perfectionism is a double-edged sword. He'd say, and he'd draw a sword on the board, and he'd say, motivation, drive, make you better. Other side, it would be kill your confidence, never good enough, self-doubt. And he's like, perfectionism is good at a certain level, but then it becomes something that holds you back from getting to that next level. And I see this all the time with these pro athletes. I mean, I have a pitcher who's, you know, one of the top prospects in an organization, and he struggles throwing out of the stretch in professional baseball. I'm like, what'd you do out of the stretch in high school? He goes, Caner, I threw out of the stretch in high school like twice. I mean, like, you started the game out of the stretch. He goes, no, no, no. Like, 2 guys got on base. He was that dominant. That's why he's a first round pick, right? So he's like, I get in the stretch, and now I'm not sure I can do this, you know? So, fuck, DJ, I'm sorry. What are we talking about again?
Progress over perfection. So we're
Thank you.
talking
So
about, yeah, how do you overcome that?
I'm going to have to cut that out too.
All
So
good.
this idea of progress over perfection, right, is like the perfectionist mentality is I don't make mistakes. Once I make a mistake, now I'm no good. I get the self-doubt. I've never made mistakes. And a lot of these pro athletes that I'm working with, they've never made mistakes before. So the perfection has not necessarily hurt them because they've been better than everybody. But there comes a point where progress becomes the goal. Can it be better today than yesterday, better tomorrow than today? And progress becomes the main driver of progress in process leading to production. So, you know, the best athletes I've been around, they have perfectionist tendencies. They just work to get those tendencies to work for them versus against them. It's like a fire. A fire can heat you a meal, it can heat your house, but it can also burn your house down. So if you're not able to be in control of yourself and know how to use that fire appropriately with awareness, you're playing a dicey game, right? It's like the athletes that say, "Oh, I got to get pissed off to play well." And it's like, well, what if you got nothing to get pissed off about, bro? You're making $30 million a year, and you're never going to have to work a day in your life, and you've had great results and everything's great. Like, what are you pissed off about? He's like, yeah, I know I'm struggling to come up with something. What do you got for me? I'm like, I got to change a perspective that you don't have to be pissed off. You have to be competitive, and you want to go out there and compete well. And Sean Casey, who you referenced earlier, is one of the, you know, he's a 300 hitter in 10 years in Major League Baseball. If he had stayed, you know, avoided the injury list a couple more years, he could be a Hall of Famer. And Case was the mayor, man. Case was ultra competitive, but he was like the nicest, voted literally the nicest guy in baseball many years. So you don't have to be angry and pissed to play well. You do have to be really competitive. And a lot of times guys make the mistake to think I got to be angry and pissed to get competitive, which that can be a strategy that works. I understand that. But it's one of those things that it's just really hard to dial in all the time to get to that state instead of just going, no, I'm going to choose to be this person. I'm going to choose to bring my identity of competitive, aggressive, big body language, attacking. I'm going to bring that to the game instead of going out there and letting how I perform dictate how I show up. That's a recipe for disaster.
BC, this has been awesome, man. 150 miles an hour. We got through almost 26 letters. I'm going to leave it here. So we have about 2 minutes. I want you to give me not a quote we've already done. Just give me something that you find yourself either saying a lot. Maybe it's a favorite quote of yours. Somebody, maybe it's a revisa. Just finish us off with just one more letter. I don't care if it's one we repeat or not, a letter we've repeated or not, but finish us off with one last little letter.
P, push the sled. I'll give you a couple more, right? So execution over expectation. You got to execute versus getting into expectation of what you think it should be and just attack it for what it is. Compete over compare. Comparison is the thief of all joy. Athletes by nature are competitive, and part of that is a comparison against other people. But if you're looking at the wrong group, you're actually not going to grow and get better. That's what happened to me growing up in a small town. I was the best guy in my area, but it was a wrong comparison, right? It's like being the best snowboarder in Mexico. Who cares? So compete, don't compare. The other one I'll leave you with, and this has been a big one for me this year, is recommit versus recreate. And as a mental performance coach, we work to install habits and routines and processes and success checklists and calendars and habit share and an operating system essentially for high performance. And then athletes like don't go out and they don't get their results. And they're like, well, that's not working. And then when you dig into it, you go like, well, you haven't been on habit share. You're not keeping your calendar. Your routine is getting blown up. Like you got to recommit to the fundamentals of elite performance instead of thinking you need to recreate yourself. And in my world with Major League Baseball hitters, you know, it even comes into, I can't, my swing's not where it needs to be. My swing doesn't feel good. And I'll say, hey man, you see in the baseball? Not really. You on time, like on time for a fastball? No, I'm between a fastball and an off speed pitch. Forget your swing. Go get on time, go see the baseball, and trust that your swing will be there. Because I don't care if your swing's there and it's the perfect biomechanical swing and it feels great. If you ain't on time and you ain't seeing the ball, you ain't got a shot. So simplifying for those guys to just recommit to the fundamentals of see the ball, recommit to the fundamentals of be on time, recommit to the fundamentals of feel the dirt under your feet, hear the dirt under your feet, look at your focal point and take a breath. And as I work with these, you know, Major League Baseball players and professional athletes, NFL, NHL, NBA, UFC, whatever, it's weekly phone calls, weekly Zoom calls. And those weekly Zoom calls, if you watch, like take Corbin Burns this year, we might've had 40 calls during the season. If you watched all 40 of those calls in succession, you'd be like, wow, there's a lot of consistency amongst those calls. And that's intentional, right? So like 80% of those calls is consistency, talking about the last outing, talking about his signal lines, looking at his execution, updating his imagery, updating his mind movie, game planning the next 5 days for what needs to happen to get prepared for his next start. That's 80% of the call that's consistent week to week, call to call. And the last 20% is what's on your mind, what's going on. And that's where, you know, that's where it changes day to day based off of what's going on, right? Is he having twins? Is he in the last year of a contract? Is he going to start an all-star game? Is he going to be a Cy Young Award winner? Is his team not getting runs? I mean, the dude pitched 8 innings in the first round of the playoffs against the Royals, gave up 1 run, 1 walk, and they lost. Like, you don't control run support, but if he had good run support, he could have won 20 games this year. You know, he pitched that well. So we're looking at his execution. He was not far off execution wise from where he was when he won the Cy Young Award in 2021. Like we can look at an execution being how consistently did I throw the baseball where I want to throw it? We look at that after every start. We watch the video and we track, did I throw the ball where I intended to throw it? That's my job as a pitcher. And if you do that, good things are going to happen. If you don't, you're not going to get results.
Brian, this is awesome. Recommit versus recreate. I want to close down by giving you an opportunity to talk specifically about mental performance daily. Everything
Yep.
else we're going to put in the show notes. I've been listening to mental performance daily every single day since 2018. Just a chance to kind of promote that.
Yeah. Mental performance daily. It's kind of my commitment. And you know, it's my success hotline. I listened to in March of 2006. I heard Dr. Rob Gilbert speak 2 to 3 minutes a day. You call and listen to a message. It's had such profound impact on my career, on my coaching, on my life, on my marriage, on my parenting, my fitness, everything. And I said, I want to honor Rob Gilbert with doing a mental performance daily podcast. Just like I wanted to honor Ken Ravizza with writing a coach's certification to train other people like he trained me. To me, mental performance daily is a tribute to Ken Ravizza, or I'm sorry, to Rob Gilbert, but it also helps make me a better coach because I have to come up with content every day. I have to be structured. I have to be disciplined to do it every day. And in 2 to 3 minutes a day, I feel like I'm giving strategies and tips that can allow performers to take their performance to another level. So check out Mental Performance Daily Podcast. Stay with me. DJ, thanks for having me. Let's go push the sled and dominate the day, brother.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.